Hi YouTube friends, I'm Heidi Villegas with Healing Harvest Homestead, and I am getting ready to make a myrrh tincture, myrrh gum resin tincture. And I thought I would hop on here and talk with you about how to make a tincture, a proper tincture, and also a little bit about the folk method versus the standard or traditional method, or the scientific method, sometimes it's called as well. And I'm going to talk about which kind of tincture method I usually use and why. Okay, and when you should use the standard method versus the folk method. All right, so what I have here, we're going to go ahead and first talk about the standardized method because I just want to show you some measurements. So what I have here, this is 40 grams of myrrh gum resin. Okay, you can see that there. My scale went off, but I'm using a 1/4 cup measurement, and it's pretty evened out on top and pressed. So basically this is a good 40 grams of my myrrh gum resin, and I'm going to go ahead and pour it into my jar. Now, for the scientific or the standardized tincture method, what you really want is usually, depending on the herb, but most herbs will take a 1:5 ratio. What that means is that you're going to measure out like let's just say 100 grams. In fact, we'll just do that. We'll use 100 grams of our herb, myrrh gum powder, to 5, which would be 500 milliliters of our alcohol, okay? And we're going to take a look at what that looks like in our pint jar. So let me go ahead and measure out another 40 grams of my myrrh gum tincture. Again, we're shooting for 100 grams. Okay. And now I'm going to measure out 20 more grams to make an even 100 grams, just for simplicity's sake. Okay. So here's 100 grams of myrrh gum resin. Myrrh gum resin happens to be a little on the heavy side, but in terms of most herbal weights, it's fairly close. And I want to just talk very quickly about, let me get my alcohol poured in. Well, let me just talk very quickly about the folk method. So the folk method to make herbal tinctures requires that you put between a 1/4 and 1/2 amount of herbal matter into your bottle, and then you cover it to the shoulder with your alcohol. And at that point you can shake it and macerate it for 4 to 6 weeks, and you're going to, generally speaking, get a really nice tincture with the folk method. Now the standardized method, as I just said, you're weighing your herbal matter and then you're measuring in cc's or milliliters your liquid, and you want a 1:5 ratio. Okay. So for most home herbalists, here's one. This is 100 milliliters. This is 2. Three. 4, and I'm going to go ahead and stir this in a bit. Okay. And then 5. All right. So here we have a standardized tincture method. And I'm probably going to end up pouring this into a quart jar, just so that in case the herb expands, which sometimes it will, I've got room for expansion, because right now I don't. But had I used the folk method for this tincture, I would have used approximately the same amount of resin that I did, about a quarter of a jar, and I would have filled up my jar to the shoulder with my high proof alcohol, and that would have given me about a 1-inch headspace to shake. The difference, I mean, I'm estimating here obviously, but the difference in liquid between this particular tincture that I did, and we're all different, all herbalists are going to measure out things differently, but the difference would probably have been about 50 milliliters of liquid. So it's pretty close. The nice thing about the folk method is that when you start working with the plants and you get to know how each plant acts in a tincture form or an herbal tea or in a glyceride, you really quickly get intuitive about how to make a nice, strong herbal infusion. If you're a student who's learning from an experienced herbalist, like I started out, Rosemary Gladstar was my first teacher. I took her class by snail mail way back in the day, and she's a proponent of the folk method. So that's actually how I learned. And my tinctures have been amazing for all these years. And once in a while, you'll make a mistake and then you fix it. So what's up with the standardized method? Why do so many herbalists insist, and actually not very many herbalists I know insist that you should use the standardized method, but they say that you're going to get a quote unquote standardized product, which means it's going to be exactly the same every single time you make it. And I'm going to argue that point, all right? Because here's the deal. You can't standardize plants. You can't standardize any plant. This myrrh gum resin that I have here, all right, it may have been grown under optimal growing conditions, and it might be the best quality myrrh ever. Another myrrh product I might purchase might be old and rancid and perhaps didn't get the right weather that year, or perhaps it was harvested at the wrong time of year. There are a whole lot of factors that go into plant and herbal medicine quality. There's your alcohol that you use. There's, the time of year that the plant is harvested, which I just mentioned, I believe. But there are a lot of factors, so you really can't standardize plant medicine. The closest you can come to standardizing is using your little formula and hoping that it's going to work out correctly for you. So I would say 90% of the time, 95% of the time, I'm using the folk method because it works really great and it's wonderful. And I can tell at this point with a lot of experience that my tinctures are working and how they're working. And you can adjust most dosages of most herbal preparations depending on the person, which you should do anyway. There is no standard dosing for herbal medicine. A big 300-pound man might require 5 dropperfuls of an herbal tincture, whereas a little tiny 100-pound woman might require only 1. You can see, and here most herbalists will say that a dose is about 3 dropperfuls or 1/2 teaspoon for an average sized adult. The problem is that we're not all the same, and there really isn't an average, quote unquote. So we have to just go by what we know. The great news about herbalism is that most herbs are actually food type herbs, in addition to having medicinal qualities. So when we're dosing our herbal medicines, we have room for some flexibility in there. And therefore we just don't have to be all uptight about, getting everything perfect. It doesn't work like that at all. Herbalism is an art. And it's an art that develops over time, as any art does. And it's also a science. Herbalism is the science of knowing the plants, the phytochemistry of the plants, how those medicinal actions work, how much to take, what to combine them with, which is also part of the art too. It's definitely an art and a science. And So there we go. Now as I go to get my quart jar, and I'm going to go ahead and put this into a quart jar, and I'm going to let this macerate for 4 to 6 weeks, shaking it probably on this with myrrh gum. I'm going to be shaking it every day because myrrh gum is, first of all, it's a powder, and it's also a resin, and it will compact at the bottom of the jar if I don't shake it every day. So if it's a leafy herb, you don't really have to do that as much. But anyway, and you might be wondering why I'm making myrrh gum tincture, and I want to also point out really fast before I talk about why I'm using myrrh gum tincture that whenever you are tincturing a gum or a resin, that includes pine resin, frankincense resin or tears, myrrh gum, and other resins, you want to use 190 proof alcohol. Most herbs tincture very, very nicely in 80 proof to 150 proof. And, you know, that's a nice range for your tincture alcohol. I personally primarily use 80 proof, but when you're working with resins and gums and things like that, you definitely want to go with your 190 or 95% alcohol proof. So there's that. Now myrrh, it's an aromatic bitter resin, and it has very strong antiseptic and disinfectant properties. It works similarly to golden seal, but the chemistry, the plant chemistry is very, very different. It works best when it comes into direct contact with the infected area, but it's really excellent for infections. If you have a bad skin infection, for example, here's a quick little remedy you could work with myrrh powder. Myrrh gum powder is use aloe vera gel, the myrrh gum powder, and perhaps some oregano or thyme essential oil, and you're going to have a really nice topical skin infection preparation. If it's a fungal infection, you would probably want to go with tea tree essential oil, which is a very strong antifungal. But myrrh gum can be used beautifully in this way. I like it as a tincture for mouth wellness and health. In fact, I think I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I just made my husband a mouthwash using herbal tinctures that I have in my apothecary that have been made already, some for many, many years. And it's a very highly antibacterial mouthwash, and because he's got a mouth infection right now, or an infection in one of his teeth that was just diagnosed by a dentist, and he does not want to take the amoxicillin that was prescribed. So this mouthwash is going to be very, very helpful for him. And I just want to mention, we have not used any prescription drugs, over-the-counter drugs, nothing for over 10 years now. And that is including through bouts of different illnesses that, you know, common illnesses that we've had. We've had the C word, and dental issues, things like this. And herbs work. Herbs can definitely work. They're safe, as for the most part. They're effective. You just need to know how to use them. So I do have an herbalism school. I would love it if you would take a look at my course offerings and see if any of them interest you. But I would love to have you join us in one if you like. My name is Heidi Villegas. My website is Healing Harvest Homestead. There are hundreds of articles over there, and I do have some free gifts for you. So they've been popping up here in the top area a few times, but check the description below. I would love to have you sign up for my newsletter list, and by taking any of my free gifts, you will be added to my newsletter list, and I give weekly free herbalism tips and encouragement, inspiration. We talk about homesteading and what's going on with our farm and homestead every week, and so it's a good newsletter. And if you don't like it, you can unsubscribe at any time. But please do subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this video. And if you have any questions at all about standard versus the folk method ways of making tinctures, of making herbal tinctures, please ask in the comments. I'm here to answer any questions you have. And, you know, I don't want to get into a debate about this. Herbalists and herbalism is one of those fields of practices that isn't standardized either. And different cultures have been using herbalism for centuries, and we all have our best practices and ways of using our herbal tinctures and making our herbal tinctures. So there is no one right way. There is no one way that's better than another. However, I will say this. If you are ever in a situation where you want to sell your herbal tinctures, you do need to standardize your personal process, whatever that is, and be able to show the FDA that you have a plan and you have good manufacturing procedures going on. I don't sell products, so basically I just teach people how to make their own. Therefore, the folk method is just fine for us in our home and for my family and my grandkids. But were I selling products, I would absolutely use the standardized method. Okay, I'm not a doctor, by the way. I am an herbalist and I'm a trained aromatherapist, and I love working with my clients and my students, and I don't diagnose, treat, cure, prevent anything. This is all for information. The nice thing is that once you figure out your herbal practice, you will never go back. All right, I'm Heidi Villegas with Healing Harvest Homestead. I hope you enjoyed this. Please subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.